Welcome to the Ministry Forum podcast, where we believe that you are not alone in your ministry journey. I'm the Reverend John Borthwick, your host, coming to you from the Center for Lifelong Learning at Knox College. Here we connect, encourage, and resource ministry leaders all across Canada in the joys, the struggles, and everything in between. I love that I get to do this work, and most of all that I get to share it with each and every one of you. So thanks for giving us a listen today. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, this podcast is made with you in mind. Well, welcome, the Reverend Dr. Karen Dimock and the Reverend Paul Kang. We're delighted to have you on the podcast. They're quite giggly this morning, but we're going to get through this, I know, or this afternoon. Let's begin with you guys introducing yourselves. First, let's start with Karen.
Okay. I currently serve as the minister at St. Andrews in Ottawa, and I should say the downtown St. Andrews. There's 4 St. Andrews in the Ottawa Presbytery, because there's a lot of us. I've been there for almost 12 years. Run the sanctuary course twice. I'm looking forward to starting it again for the 3rd time coming up in a few weeks. So yeah, very pleased to be here, and I don't know what else to say.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What about yourself, Paul? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you at?
Hi, I'm at Leaside Presbyterian Church. It's in Midtown Toronto, and I've been here just over a year as their, and I ran the sanctuary course just the one time within the first 3 months of coming here.
Awesome. Well, let's dig into the theme of our conversation, talking about this sanctuary course. And it's wonderful, Paul, that you're talking to us in the sanctuary about the sanctuary course. That's great. So how did you hear about the resources from Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries? Where did you first hear about them?
I was trying to remember that because it's been a few years, but I know that they were the recipient of the A.H. Johnson Award, the Cutting Edge of Ministry Award. So I think the first time I saw it, one of the members of my congregation pointed out to me an article about it in PC Connections. She's like, this looks really good, because we'd been talking about, I think at that point we were just coming out of the pandemic. I had talked to people in the community, a housing coordinator at the Y, a school principal, the United Way, and they were talking about one of the really pressing concerns in the community at that point, probably still is, was mental health. And we're certainly seeing signs of that in the church. So a member of the congregation pointed it out to me, and not long after that, I was in Vancouver, and at St. Andrew's Hall, they run it with their students. So the chaplain there met me to talk to me about it. There's Richard Watson, who's at Kerrisdale Presbyterian, was running it at the time, invited me to a session. It was just really excellent. The material was all free, so it was not hard to access, and it was really impressive. So I was like, okay, hey, let's try this. So long answer, but it was really grand. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's great. And Paul, where did you hear about these resources?
3 points of contact. The first was a wise minister colleague by the name of Reverend Karen Dimock, who told me first about it. She ran it in her church, so I was intrigued and then forgot about it. But then I was at General Assembly a couple years ago, and I was at the E.H. Johnson Awards, and I listened to Daniel Whitehead talk about the program, and I thought it was very interesting. And so I got the overview there. And then a third point of contact was the church administrator at our church in her home church ran it there a couple of times. So 3 different people spoke very highly of it. And so then I was hooked and convinced.
And what was it about the course that sort of piqued your interest, Paul? What would you say? Why? What interested you about the course? And then maybe a little bit about why you think this kind of course would be important or needed in the life of a congregation.
I think the course, the way it was structured and organized, it helps facilitate discussions over several sessions. So it's a program that's almost like plug and play, where there was a curriculum to follow, but also lots of videos and good questions to ponder. So I always wanted to, I know that mental health is a pressing issue in our church and in our society. And to have a space like a church where we can speak openly and hopefully be unafraid and share some of our vulnerabilities with one another. I thought this would be a great place, and especially without having mental health professional experience or background myself. This course really provided that guidance and that confidence to offer that space and open that space up to people.
Awesome. And Karen, what about yourself?
Just say what Paul said, but I think that there really is the depth and of the resource. Like as Paul says, like we're not mental health professionals, and there's a little bit of how do I lead a conversation on this? And so it really did equip the leadership. The materials were fantastic. I'm a big fan of anything where you come together around a meal. So I think some of our best ministry happens there. So we could have a meal. I think in the resources itself, I really appreciated the video clips at the beginning. Like there was a video beforehand, but there was always someone sharing their lived experience at the start, so someone who was living with a particular mental health challenge. And they were so vulnerable on those videos, but it also gave us, that helped us have a safe place to hear from someone. And yeah, it did a lot to create a safe place. There was someone's story who had gifted their story to the group, and we could discuss that through the course guide. And I think it helped with boundaries and safety and intimacy, made for really good conversations. It was a great start. The way each week started was really excellent. And I appreciated that. Like I sometimes joke that it's like alpha and for the topic of mental health, because it is so well put together, right? The theologians, the sociologists, the psychologists. Yeah.
And was the design, did the course itself give you suggestions? Like you said, you had a meal. Was it like you should have a meal and do it? Was it in your context? Was it always in person as well? Like, was that highly recommended, or was there an option for a virtual kind of experience of it, or what would you say?
From what I recall, there is some option for virtual, but it was recommended for in person. And the people I talked to who had led it had advocated strongly for doing it in person.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah. I think there's something there in the course that helps you do it online. And I know I had thought about it, but I had enough people who were willing to come and do it in person. Yeah, when I offered it the first time, we were still at that phase where it was 2 years ago now, so 2024, there were still some people who were hesitant about coming out in the winter when people had colds. And so a lot of our ministry was still hybrid, but this we did in person.
And was that the same for you, Paul? Did you offer it in person, and was there a meal involved, or how did you?
Yeah, we thought that was important to have that human interaction. We did it on Sundays after church, and we began with a meal, and that's where we got to know each other. And we actually did it during the season of Lent, so we timed it where our last session came just before Easter. So Easter was a big celebration. It felt like an even more important celebration as we journeyed together for those 8 weeks, and then celebrated the last class together with a meal.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what were your hopes? I'm sure the course itself has a series of learning goals or objectives or something like that. But what would you say were your hopes in offering this in the communities where you serve? What was your hope or expectation that people would get out of this, or what the experience would be like?
Initially, I hoped that people connected to our church, those who are living with mental illnesses, would attend and be part of this. It didn't turn out that way. Who showed up were actually the spouses or the parent of someone, a family member with a mental illness. So it was primarily the caregiver or the partner who showed up, and then others also who have experienced mental illness in their lives. And so the hope was to have a gathering and a time and place where we can openly discuss these issues and look at them not necessarily from a point of we we're trying to eliminate the symptoms, but maybe try to lessen the stigma and then try to find healing through that as a first step.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
What about for yourself, Karen?
The the goal for us was to have a better understanding of mental health, and from that a better understanding of how we can support ourselves, our loved ones, our church community, and as a church community, how we as a church community can better understand and support each other and people out from the wider community as well. So I think growing in our understanding and support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Now, you've done it 3 times, Karen.
twice.
Has each, or sorry, twice. You're about to do it a third time.
Yes.
Gotcha. And in the 2 times, was it a similar outcome each time? Your experience with the 2 different cohorts that you had?
Um, I think that who comes contributes hugely to the outcome. So, yes, I think both times we grew in understanding and support. The experience was very different each time because of the people involved. Um, but people got to know each other. There were, the first time we did it, there were a couple of people who brought friends. I don't know if you would, I think it's a vulnerable thing. So, expecting someone who didn't know the church to come, I thought afterwards maybe that was a bit of a high hope, but a couple of people brought friends, and they have one of them I've seen a couple times, but one woman has come to more of our events, and people in the church they made friends like around the meal, and they they continue to care for each other, and I find that amazing, like wonderful, right? When you just see that they spent 8 sessions together, and now they've got a new friend. And by support, I mean they drive each other places, and they're good to each other. They look out for each other.
That's wonderful.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think the outcome was really good. People
Hmm.
spoke about it. People looked for help after the course. It was good.
Hmm. Did anything surprise you in the times when you've delivered it, where something you weren't expecting happen?
I learned. I don't know.
Hmm.
I guess I was just sort of waiting. I mean, part of it was going in. I was just curious what was going to happen. There
Mm-hmm.
were things I learned that were quite good. I mean, I think it was the way the group moved together. It brought together a group who had not normally been together, right? Like they weren't all on the same committees or part of the same aspects of the church. So I was quite amazed at, I guess, how quickly they gelled around the material.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And I'll ask the same question to you, Paul, in just a second. But just also, would you say, like in churches, there's often people that you can always imagine if we put anything out there, these people are going to turn up. It sounds like a few new people came to
mhm.
one of your courses, or both. Um, did people who typically hadn't been involved in other things turn up for these sessions?
Yeah, probably a few of them. There were a few people I was probably surprised to see. I mean, if I run a
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday evening discussion group, yes, there's people who will come quite often because they're curious, and some of them came. But no, I think a lot of people were intrigued by the topic, and so yeah, I was a bit surprised by pleasantly surprised by who came.
Yeah, I just my own suspicion or curiosity is, would a course like this offer another entry point for people to engage in community in a church setting, as opposed to, you know, come to Thursday evening Bible study, or we're gonna do some other kind of thing that people might feel, I'm not so sure I'm not sure I'm equipped for that or comfortable. But this might be another foray into engaging in a different kind of community in the church. What about you, Paul? Was there anything that surprised you in the session you ran?
I think what surprised me was the people who showed up, and there were a few people I had no idea that mental health issues was important to them, or they experienced mental illness in their lives. So, that was a really pleasant surprise. And then just what surprised me was after a few sessions, the openness of people to share and to become vulnerable and to speak openly. And then that real kind of shared experience of vulnerability together really binded us together. And so slowly trust, I think, developed, that we were entrusting one another. And from that, there was community was born. And so it was it was a nice surprise to see that evolution.
Yeah, and I suppose the theme of the hope of it being a sanctuary, a place where a church could be a sanctuary for people to have these kind of conversations, and just what I've seen over the years in ministry, I think it's really interesting. You say how there's people in our congregations that are struggling or dealing with stuff that we sometimes never know, and sometimes they're the people that are very involved in the community of the church, but still there's some stuff that you just don't know, and in certain cases, maybe by being bold or brave as a congregation to offer a course like this, it does create that opportunity of, within the confines of the church community, maybe this is the space or this is the moment where I can share a little more about what's going on in my life, and hopefully the design of the course and just the people that are there. You've both talked about how quickly people went very deep and were vulnerable and very caring for each other. That can be a place of, it creates that place of safety, but also creates that place of comfort and ease of, now we've gone to another level in our relationship together as a church community.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Anything more on that, Karen? I looked like you were having a thought.
Oh, no, I just sort of it takes me back to when to the whole experience of the course.
Mm-hmm.
It was very good. One of the things that I did do, and part of why we offered it the second time, is that I think vulnerability and trust are big aspects of the course. I had decided for one of the first times ever that we were going to limit the size of the group, right? That sometimes to 12. And that people who came had to commit to being there for the whole thing. So about 2 or 3, 4 weeks in, I had a few people like, oh, can we join? And I was like, at that point, the group had started to gel, and I was like, I'm sorry, but I'll do it in the fall. I think that was a good decision, right? And I think that's part of the course, that people could trust it would be the same people each week. There was one week when someone was sick and everyone's like, where are they? Right? Like, that's when you're like, oh, they really care. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was good.
Yeah. And from what you're saying, it sounds like, while you did, I'm sure many people, I know I've done it in my day, would strongly encourage that people come to every session. And I'm sure you've had the experience where someone says, I really want to come to this. I'm so keen on it. It's going to be great, but I'm going to miss 6 of the 8 that you're going to offer. And it's like, okay, that's not really what I was looking for, but that's great. And now in this new virtual world we live in, everyone will say, will it be recorded as well if it's virtual? And it's like, I guess, but that's really not the point.
No.
We'd really love to have you contributing. But it sounds like, from what you're describing, something kept people coming back and committing to being there every week for each other. Obviously, some things will happen where someone couldn't be there, but it sounds like you had really good retention.
It was great that way.
Mm-hmm. Did you have the same, Paul? Did the same people come every week fairly consistently?
Yes, for the most part. People committed ahead of time. That was part of upfront. We stated that this course will most likely be offered again at another time. So if you can commit to the majority of the sessions, then that was something to consider.
Mm-hmm. The next question I'm just curious about for yourselves. It was a question I asked in a different way, both to Laura Howe and to Daniel Whitehead, just because both of them have essentially stepped into the church world in a way and tried to create conversations related to mental health. And so what I'd asked them was, in doing your work, have you ever had pushback or people saying to you, why is the church making this a priority, or why would could this possibly be important, and things like that? And if people had listened to our first and second episodes with our interviews with both of them, they do offer some interesting thoughts on that. I just wondered in your own church community if you heard anything or sensed anything from anybody in the church community just about, why is the church putting on a course like this, or why would this be an important topic, or anything like that? And if not, what was the response within the church community?
No pushback from my church here. People were very receptive, and it's something that I credit to the members here that they feel they comfortable enough to share if they or someone in their family is struggling or has some mental health concern. Just from my own personal experience, I remember sharing, it was over 10 years ago at a presbytery meeting, some of the mental health challenges I was living through at that moment in time, and the reaction there was very mixed. And I'm not sure, some were giving me recommendations on what I should do, and so I think the church has come a long way in the past 12 years, or the past 10 years, in kind of normalizing this conversation, and then with a program such as Sanctuary, I think this is the next step, the next progression of of providing tools for people in community and the support that we need to continue on in this journey.
I didn't experience any pushback. Yeah. I was trying to think if I did, but no.
That's good. Yeah. That's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued by what you said there, Paul, around how we've come a long way and that these conversations are happening in the church. And one of the questions I asked Daniel for sure was in the wider community, in the wider culture, the Mental Health Commission of Canada has created courses that people can take to learn more about mental health. They've got a mental health first aid course and things like that. And I think where I'm curious about is I wonder, because Karen, you had mentioned this about St. Andrew's Hall and the chaplain there offering this course for the community and stuff like that. I'm just wondering, both of you having graduated from a theological seminary and have become ministers along the way, do you think something like this would be a good thing to integrate into people's training, maybe not through the college necessarily, but as a part of being a minister in a church, or if you're going to provide leadership in a church, you should have an opportunity to go through a course like this. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it would be helpful. No, it would be helpful. I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because there's always like, oh, they didn't teach you that at seminary. I mean, that's a theme from the moment you start in your first church. But if you think of seminaries as the place where you build your toolkit for ministry and you become aware of what resources are out there because you're going to need to draw on them, I think knowing about courses like this, whether you've taken them or not, is really important. It certainly, yeah. I mean, kudos to you with the ministry forum. Like I go onto your thing and I look at what are all the upcoming courses that are happening in and around Canada for ministers. And it's helpful to have that like coming from Knox College. And I do think, knowing that it's out there is a good thing. No, definitely. I mean, you land in your first charge and you don't know what you're gonna need, but it's definitely a good piece of like my toolkit.
Well, and I wonder just about because I'm not surprisingly I'm fully on board with what you say around seminary isn't going to teach you everything, and that's just the way it is. It can't possibly. But I do wonder about how you've described the experience of the course. I almost wonder if, as a part of as a kind of a recommendation for engaging with the course, if it would be helpful for ministers. I mean, Paul, you've only been in this community for about a year. If you take a bit of time to be a part of a community that's actually best done, if it's led by the minister, it's actually best done having in a congregational setting, in the sense of there is a real sense of cohesion, a sense of community that comes as a part of taking this course together. And also opening yourself as the ministry leader up to some of the real needs and tangible needs that are in your congregation. What do you sort of think of that, Paul? What's your reaction to that?
I think anything that can help us be more present to one another. Um, in this course early on, there's an exercise called a listening exercise, and it's to listen actively is it takes practice, and so just we did this exercise in pairs with people and practice it. So it it gives people an opportunity just to lean in on these skills that are so necessary and needed if we're going to be present to one another. So to listen deeply to one another, I think whether it's I think it's ideal that to have this course like in a church, because it's not. This is not just theory. There is some theory, but I think there's a lot of practice, and and that's really beneficial. I think that's one of the real, gifts of this program.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of imagining. If you've ever done training courses, it's kind of in your like when you're studying at the same time, it often feels like, you're just going through the motions and getting that thing done. And, you really don't see the actual connections that are made in an actual congregational or ministry setting in the same way. I think that's what you're raising up there, Paul. What about you, Karen?
I think the course was, when Paul's talking about the listening exercise, the it's built around curiosity and not being judgmental, and that active listening, which really does create sanctuary. I think it's a good model for how we can live in the world, right? It's helpful. That in and of itself is helpful for your mental health. Yeah, this is not quite answering your question, but when Paul was speaking, I was thinking one of the things that we heard things that were said and unsaid. And so I was aware, and a couple other people mentioned it, there was a deep river of grief running through a lot of people's lives. And so while one of our comments at the end of the course was like, it didn't have a next step. They're like, what do we get to do next?
Right.
What we did, like last year, I didn't run the course, but I did some workshops on understanding grief. Right. So there was that listening, something came out of it. Right. You listened and you could hear things, whether they were said or not. You started to be aware of the movements in people's lives. And it was really powerful that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that was going to be my next question. Like, what kind of outcomes or what kind of next steps have you taken? It sounds like those are really from the deep listening comes opportunities and our ideas around. I think people could use this, or this would be helpful to our community. That's great. As opposed to standing up on a Sunday morning and saying, "Hey, can you tell me what your mental health challenges are, everyone?" And I'll think about what things we should put on at the church. Yeah. To have a tangible experience of something together that through deep listening, people can sort of see what kind of next steps might be taken. Have there been next steps in your community as well, Paul? After taking the one cohort, are you planning on doing it again soon, or?
Well, the first step was that one member was willing. We did when the course was finished, we celebrated with all the members who participated. We participated in a worship service itself. So
Oh wow!
people led liturgy. We sang a song. We sang actually that song that was in the sanctuary course together. And then one member, she was bold enough to actually share her testimony, and so that was received really well. So that whole idea about everyone has a story to tell. And not only that, but we have a community that welcomes and will honor those stories in a non-judgmental way and receive those stories. So that whole idea about developing our own stories, how do we do that? Sometimes it can be oral, but other times it could be written, as in like a spiritual legacy. So I've kind of looked into that, and we've been dabbling in that, helping people write their own stories, reflect on their own journeys, not only mental health but spiritual journeys, and how that intersect with faith, so that their whole person, how they can share their story that way. So I'm hoping that will continue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Karen, did you want to say more around next steps or things that you're going to be doing?
No, I've got a group of young adults in the church who've been meeting for about a year and a half, and they were curious about this. So that's the starting point for offering it this time round, is with a group of young adults, but opening it up to other people as well. Yeah, I want to know more about this, writing your stories, Paul. I'll have to I think that
Yeah.
we have started, yeah. People are always
Eh,
in, I know in worship, when we have a time for someone to share their story, it really does move people, and it's good for our own faith to hear someone else express their faith.
Well, the idea came from my spiritual director, who's also a retired chaplain. And so she did it with patients who were in palliative care, so to help craft a spiritual legacy. So often we only hear the people's stories once they've deceased at their funeral. We hear the obituary or the eulogy, but this is while they're still living, to craft a story. So to share, and so just like this course, she's provided some answers or some questions to help guide. So it doesn't have to be something big elaborate, but there are certain questions that can guide people through the process. So I'd be happy to share that.
Mm. Well, it seems to bring up what has been kind of a theme in your conversation today, just around the idea of the stigmatization or the stuff that was unknown or things that have been kept secret. The more we're able to share our story out loud and have the courage and also the sanctuary or the safety to be able to do that in a community that is going to hold that story and honor it,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a really beautiful way of um, of being in community together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the other strengths of this program is the theological aspect. I think they did a really good job of of emphasizing the importance of lament.
Mm.
So we would open often with a psalm, and the psalmist was lamenting often in these psalms, some type of loss, some type of grieving. So this idea of lamenting, that's part of the human experience. It's part of the journey, and it's okay to lament. Sometimes I think
Mm-hmm.
we don't in worship offer enough time for that, and so I think that can be helpful as well.
Was there anything else either of you wanted to add that I haven't asked you that you wished to share about the sanctuary course?
I could probably go on forever, like just the things we learned and experienced, but I mean, you've covered a lot of ground. I agree with Paul. The theological um, depth of it was interesting, having the sociological perspective. It was good. I really appreciated, I think in the first lesson where they talked to you about what mental health is, right? That was so helpful, right? Like that we all have mental health. It's not, just like we have physical health, we have mental health. And I mean, you could see light bulbs going off from the first week with people in terms of, I hadn't thought about it like that. Right. So there were a lot of ones, I think my best light bulb moments where there was one on, was on self-care, right? And, in the opening question, and everyone's like, oh, self-care, I journal, I go to the spa, and, it was about boundaries. And it led to great conversations, right? And I was like, of course, like that's the foundation to that. It just, yeah, light bulbs went off that helped us look after ourselves. And you could just see there was a level of engagement because people were being provoked in ways that were beneficial and helpful. And yeah, it was so good.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say
Paul,
enough
any
good
light
things
bulb?
about it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, any light bulb moments for you as we wrap up?
I think in one of the later sessions, they talked about the recovery journey and that
Mhm.
there's 5 consistent processes
Yeah.
that are part of that journey. And quickly they were discovering and nurturing hope for the future, and then establishing a positive sense of identity, taking
Mhm.
responsibility for building a meaningful life,
Mhm.
pursuing the education and information needed for self care and advocacy, and then
Mhm.
developing support systems and engaging in community. So, the third item, taking responsibility for building a meaningful life, it wasn't so much a light bulb, but it was definitely a discussion that came out of that. What responsibility do we have for ourselves, especially maybe those who feel undone by mental illness? It's very hard for them to take responsibility when they're feeling a certain low point in their lives. But also, what's our responsibility as a faith community to those people or to those who provide care to them? So that was an important part, not only self-responsibility, but the responsibility we have for our siblings, for those who are often overlooked or don't go noticed or are suffering in silence. So this really raised awareness. And so there were some alarm bells going, and that they continue to. I think we look around and we're more awake, and we notice. I think what people might be going through, and hopefully we anticipate some of these challenges.
That's a great term, Paul. We're more awake.
Well, you two are excellent advocates and champions of the Sanctuary Course. I hope, just like Paul taking the good advice from a wise ministry leader that he knew from the Ottawa area named Karen, I hope others, when they listen to this podcast episode, they might also check out the Sanctuary Course and maybe have those really meaningful and vulnerable and opportunities to wake up a little more in their congregations in the future. I really appreciate you joining me today, and I'm so grateful for your ministries and for the communities you serve, and for people taking seriously mental health and the ways in which the church can become a sanctuary for folks who are struggling with that, and also take care of each other in the midst of it all. Thanks for joining us on the Ministry Forum podcast. We hope today's episode encouraged you and reminded you that you are not alone in ministry. If this episode resonated, tell someone. Please don't keep us a secret. And if you can, subscribe, rate, or leave a review wherever you listen. It helps us reach more ministry leaders just like you. And honestly, it reminds us that we're not alone either. Find more resources and ways to connect at ministryforum.ca and follow us on social media at Ministry Forum. Until next time, may God's strength and courage be yours. May you be fearless, not reckless. And may you be well in body, mind, and spirit. And may you be at peace.